Welcome back. We are now moving on to our next episode, and we continue with Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan, a former medical doctor, former officer of the Indian Administrative Service, and a political activist. Uh, Dr. Narayan, in this segment, we want to talk to you about education challenges in India. The first natural question, because this is pretty hot, is how do you see the national education policy that the government has recently announced?
It's a very important question. But in order to really look at that, we must see where we are as a country in terms of education. On the one hand, our demand side is supremely strong. We are a very blessed country. The kids are intelligent and hardworking. The parents, irrespective of caste, region, religion, economic status, whatever, every community, every family wants their kids to do very well. They're willing to sacrifice anything for their kids' future, which is a remarkable trait. No, we take it for granted, but many societies don't have this. The governments, while they're failing to give leadership and ensure outcomes, they actually are spending quite a lot of money by Indian standards. For our low public expenditure, spending 4.4% of GDP on education is not a joke. And the society values education. When somebody becomes a CA or joins an IIT or IIM or becomes an IAS officer, imagine the adulation, the publicity, the celebration in the community. We value success and accomplishment. We have all the ingredients. Demand side is supremely strong, but outcomes are appallingly bad. This is the clash between the remarkable demand side and an extremely, extremely sad outcomes.
So I will interrupt you at this point. I'm not clear about what you mean by outcome. Are you saying that the people who are coming out of our educational system are not adequately skilled? Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. Okay. Our 1% of our kids at school level, only 1%, are comparable to the better countries in terms of school education. Only 1%. Okay. About 10-15% are substandard, but they can make up with some hard work and opportunity. About 80% are just nowhere in the reckoning. You have school certificates, you have classes, you have marks, all that stuff. But by any standard, you have done in many surveys in the country. The first Asar survey in India started by Pratham. In fact, I released it along with Montek Singh Ahluwalia, then Deputy Chairman Planning Commission in Delhi. Since then, I've been following. Even in 8th grade, the elementary things, not even understanding and application. We're talking about reading and some arithmetic, not even knowing why they're doing, but just doing that. A subtraction and a division or reading a bit. We are absolutely useless. Between 14 and 18 years of age, in 2020, 50% of kids cannot look at a watch and read time.
Is that true?
Yes. I'm not saying this casually. These are proven surveys. 50% of kids, about 75 to 80% can say the hour. Right now, for instance, my watch shows 11:35, 35 minutes past 11. 11 something, 75, 80% able to say. But 50% kids cannot tell you it is 11 hours, 35 minutes. It is that bad. I'm not talking of some fancy, some complicated stuff. 50% cannot weigh a commodity, for instance. Let's say 2.5 kilograms of brinjal. They cannot put the appropriate weights to equal 2.5 kilograms to weigh that. It is that bad. We are talking of high-value things. The simple, elementary life skills, a significant section of our kids are lacking. That's the context in which we're discussing the education policy.
Does the NEP address that in any way?
Absolutely. I am happy because for the first time, we should have done it long ago, there is an honest acknowledgement of our significant failure. Second, they looked at the reasons. I mentioned to you the demand side is very, very strong. We all understand that. It's a supply that is terrible. Why? We fail to understand the meaning of success and measure success honestly and intelligently. Success is measured in the examinations by the kid, by the teacher, by the management, by the parents. In the earlier session, we discussed 99.2%. No, you give a test, you tell them this is success, our kids are getting success. Our parents are working for success. Our teachers are preparing for success. How can you blame them? You fail to define success and measure success honestly. You have not defined it intelligently. You have not measured it credibly. So that is the heart of it. Plus, there are many other things that go. A roadmap is now visible in the education policy. Why? The reason why I'm happy with that is no policy in itself can achieve outcomes. At least it's giving us a reasonable roadmap for us to work on. Then we have to all work together. Many points that they have made in the education policy, the foundational learning, rather than this lesson plan and this road-based thing, first look at foundational learning levels and see that they achieve that. And then proper evaluation, not based on rote learning and mass copying, which are very common in our country, both rote learning and rampant mass copying. I mean, I'm very sad to say this publicly, but unless we acknowledge our follies, we cannot improve things. In many states, there is rampant mass copying institutionalized. It's not a sporadic person copying. It's institutionalized. We are simply hoodwinking ourselves.
Dr. Narayan, does it mean that the teachers and are also involved in that?
See, we got into a rat race. What's happening is once you have inflated grades, and once your success is measured by that inflated grades, even the better teachers and better schools, what are they doing? Look, my kids honestly are doing 80%. They are getting 95% without knowing anything. Therefore, I must get 99%. So this kind of a terrible vicious cycle has set in most states of India.
All right,
and if you take schools, the government is saying that school got 100% pass mark, 100% first class, you got only 45%. Why? Therefore, why should I be in? So each one is now influenced by the base impulses of the other. Across the country, we created a vicious cycle. It's a terrible situation.
I'll get into my second question. There has been a controversy, for example, over the NEET exam. And maybe, I'm not saying that they are right, but maybe there is some merit saying that, look, the NEET exam is hard. My state board has not necessarily prepared me for that level. Okay. Point number one is, do you agree or do you think that we need a common entrance exam of the NEET variety in order to place people in different colleges?
Mr. Pattabhi, higher education by definition is university education. There's a universality to it. If we cannot even be national in scope in comparing ourselves, establishing benchmarks and measuring the talent and ability and the aptitude, then we are hoodwinking ourselves.
Okay.
Therefore, some kind of a broad national framework, broad national benchmark, that's what these examinations are like. For instance, in the US, you have SAT examinations,
Exactly.
Scholastic Aptitude Test, or ACT examination. In Britain, you have O levels, A levels, and so on and so forth. Certainly, each state board has its own curriculum, but in general, I find that that problem is not insurmountable. Many states are slowly, after all, when you look at language or physics or mathematics or natural sciences or something else, what is so unique or special about it, except your local language and local culture and local history, everything else is universal. Therefore, to conform to certain benchmarks over a period of time is entirely feasible. And I don't really see any problem. I believe it's necessary. And we have to constantly upgrade that and improve that. And not only national, actually we must become global. We must measure ourselves by global standards, increasing.
All right. Taking off from there, taking off from what you said about your acceptance that we must be benchmarked across the country, would it make sense not to have multiple boards, a state board, ISC board, an ICSE board, an IGSC board, etc., and have just one common exam in class 12 nationally?
I probably will not go that far. Well, measurement of outcomes can be somewhat uniform so that there's comparability. The method you reach there can be different. and let 1,000 flowers bloom. One can learn from each other. The other thing is, in a constitutional framework that we have, a federal framework, obviously each state has to ultimately own the school education in particular. And therefore, if you take away that, if the states lose interest in that, apart from the constitutional difficulties, even operationally, it may not be the best thing. Therefore, I am in principle a great supporter of decentralization. But that does not mean outcomes have to be measured in a decentralized manner or in a very casual, dispersed manner. These are two different things altogether.
Are there any specific changes that you would like to see in education?
What the policy has aimed at, some of the things are very valuable. I mentioned evaluation already. The cluster approach in public school system is very vital. What's happened is, over the years, in our anxiety to create a school in the neighborhood, we created unviable small schools, make-believe schools. 140,000 schools in India have fewer than 30 children. There are actually schools, and I demonstrated that in Andhra Pradesh Assembly, in the combined Andhra Pradesh state, there are many schools where the teachers outnumber the students enrolled.
My God.
I'm not misspeaking. While the average teacher-student ratio is 1:16 or 1:17 in most of the southern states, the actual distribution is extraordinarily skewed because of all these silly things. Therefore, clusters where the human resources, the teachers, the technological resources, the tablets, the computer software, and so on and so forth. And when you go for vocational education, for instance, you can't obviously have for every school many vocational disciplines, but in a cluster of schools, you can have that, you can share them. I think that's an immensely sensible thing. Light and tight regulation is a good one. Bringing in vocational education at the high school level from grade 9 initially, and integrating that with the curriculum, and at the college level too, the policy talked about making it flexible. You can do a couple of years of vocational education, you can have the credits are transferable, you can take up some degree. I think all these are sound. There are two things I would like to see what are not emphasized in this policy. One is, you like it or not, the bulk of the students now are going to private schools. Right now, out of the 240 million school children in India, roughly 50% are in private schools. A significant number of them are from poor families. If you take the last 10 years alone, the public school enrollment, government school enrollment has fallen by about 15-20% in absolute numbers. The private school enrollment has gone up by 50% or thereabouts in the last 10 years or so. Today, they're roughly 50-50, and the number is increasing. Who are the new entrants to private schools, net new entrants to private schools? The rich and middle class already migrated to private schools long back. It is the poor. And they are paying out of pocket very large sums disproportionate to their income in the hope that their children get some opportunity, some advantage. And most of these are ramshackle schools at the low end. 70% of them, they charge only 500 rupees and less than that per month. And the education is ramshackle there too. Though it may be on the whole, on an average, a little better than government schools, but they're not good either. So what we should do is systematize the school education, whether it's private or government, ensure the outcomes are there. Once outcomes are there, ensure the scale, and this is important, let the money follow the kid. The people of India are already voting with their feet. Let the money follow the kid, because the average expenditure on education in public schools in the southern states, for instance, is from 70 to 90,000 rupees per child per year. You take Andhra Pradesh and Telangana, it comes to 80 to 90,000 rupees per child per year.
Is that a large sum, or is that not a large sum?
It's a huge sum by Indian standard. 80,000 rupees per year per kid at school.
That is being paid by the parents. Is that what you're saying?
It is what the government is spending.
Government is investing, okay. All right.
For these kids. Whereas in private schools, if you take away a very small number of high-end elite schools, the average fee is only about 10,000 or 8,000 rupees.
Okay.
Even for decent education, easily at 15,000-20,000 rupees, you can provide a reasonably decent quality education. Therefore, it's actually economical. And there is a demographic change happening. People always have the vision, have the view of India of a country with growing population, but actually, large parts of India population is stabilizing. The number of children that go to schools in the next 10 years is going to be much less than the number of children in the last 10 years. In the southern states, for instance, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, and many other states. And therefore, having large number of public school teachers highly paid and anyway functioning very poorly and spending a large sum of money without student population in the next 10, 20 years is not a very smart way of handling money. You're an accountant. You need finances. You understand the economics of it. Private sector is much more flexible, much more nimble-footed.
Can I come in here to ask you whether it would be a good idea if the government schools with all their big infrastructure in terms of land can work with private players? I don't want to name them, some of these well-known foundations.
Absolutely. We must be very flexible. For instance, there are many non-profits, and I have seen many former students of these Kendriya Vidyalayas and some other schools, or some schools run by public sector enterprise that are now closed down, like IDPL, for instance. They want to run schools because there's always emotional attachment to the school that you studied, and we have no mechanism now. Encourage them and provide this infrastructure facility, as long as, in those cases, obviously, if it's non-profit motive, provided outcomes are guaranteed. And even commercial private sector is coming in, as long as everything is transparent and outcomes are guaranteed and there's no exploitative fee structure. Focus on the outcome. You don't care whether the kid is in private school or government school. The kid is a kid. It's our country's kid, our society's kid. We are only bothered about the kid's potential being fulfilled. Everything else is secondary.
Dr. Narayan, as we begin to wind up this session, I have one question. I don't know whether it could be considered sensitive, but let me put that question across, because I've been a teacher for over 20 plus 25 years to be precise. You have been a social reformer. Do you think that education has moved away from where it once was to becoming a business today?
Unquestionably, but there's no point lamenting and complaining and moralizing. It is the state's colossal failure that created a market demand, and the market is now responding. Both in education and healthcare, as the state, Indian state has spectacularly collapsed. We have failed. I went to a government school. My teachers were paid 70 rupees a month. I went to a Panchayat Samiti school, Zilla Parishad school, the leaky roofs, thatched huts, mud road to the road, defecation on both sides of the road, no toilet in the school. These were the conditions. But we had fantastic education. The community, the teachers, the local government together guaranteed quality outcomes despite very primitive conditions. I go back to the same schools today, the expenditure is 10, 20, 30 times. Most of the kids there, in fact, I can say almost no kid there can fulfill her potential. I say it with deepest sadness. Now, it is this that drove the private sector. It is not a private sector which is a corrupt and exploitative one. No, the easy categorization that private is bad, government is good, is nonsensical. At the end of the day, what Deng Xiaoping said, whether the cat is white or black doesn't matter. Does it catch mice or not? Now, the parents are sending there, even the poor parents are sending there because they feel there is a need. Now, the issue is not whether it's private or public. Two things. One, outcomes wherever they are. And two, make sure that no child is denied quality education for want of money, and therefore create a mechanism by which the lower middle class and the poor, school education or higher education, they are never denied education as long as they are able at college level. School level ability does not arise. Everybody must get access to education. Able and willing to work, they must have education by scholarships, by fee reimbursements, by money following the kid, and in case of higher education, which is expensive, soft loans where the government bears some of the interest burden and so on. There are many mechanisms. Don't bother about who provides it. Bother about who gets it and what she gets.
That was very nice, Dr. Jayaprakash Narayan. It was very nice to hear a lot of positives. Positives like the NEP is in the right direction. Positives like, no, we are spending good amount of money for a country of our size on education. And positives like that the private sector is doing a good job, largely because the government or the society played truant with what it ought to have done. I personally enjoyed conversing with you, and I'm sure many of the things that you have told us today will happen in the days ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you.